She only entered the village bake-off to prove a point, but when rivalry turned to murder, Agatha found herself mixing more than batter. This is Agatha Raisin and the Baker of Burford. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments make this cozy corner feel even warmer, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. The morning sunlight slanted across Castley like a housewife showing off her best side, golden, tidy, and faintly self-satisfied. From her cottage window, Agatha Raisin glared at it as though the weather had personal malice. Sunshine meant enthusiasm, and enthusiasm meant the Women's Institute was about to descend upon her with flour, forms, and false cheer. The kettle rattled on the hob while Hodge, her sleek grey cat, stretched insolently on the windowsill. Agatha jabbed at her cigarette in the ashtray, eyeing the invitation that lay on the table. The Burford Village Bake-Off. Entries welcome from all Cotswold parishes. Bake-Off, she muttered, taking a drag. The word alone smells of humiliation. A gentle knock came at the door. Agatha groaned. Only one person in the village could make a knock sound apologetic. Mrs. Blocksby entered, serene as ever, carrying a small basket of apples and good intentions. "I thought you might like some fruit for inspiration," she said kindly. "I'm inspired to pour gin, not batter," Agatha said. "Why must these people insist on baking as if it were a moral virtue?" Mrs. Blocksby smiled. "Because it gives them something to do besides gossip about their neighbours. Though, of course, it doesn't prevent that entirely." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "I suppose Doris Simpson's been spreading it round that I couldn't boil an egg without setting off the smoke alarm." Mrs. Blocksby hesitated, which was answer enough. That afternoon, Agatha found herself at the W.I. Hall, surrounded by pastel cardigans and judgment. The scent of vanilla essence hung thick as perfume. Doris Simpson presided over the sign-up table like a vicar at confession. "Well, Aggie," Doris trilled, "we simply must have a representative from Castley. We can't let Evesham win again, though their sponge last year did rise beautifully." Agatha, cornered, puffed herself up. "I'll do it," she declared, surprising herself as much as the others. "I'll show them that modern women can bake without smelling of yeast." A polite silence followed. Mrs. Blocksby looked heavenward. By the next morning, her kitchen looked like a crime scene. There was butter on the curtains, sugar on the cat, and something that might once have been flour now forming dunes on the floor. "Stay out of it, Hodge," Agatha warned as he eyed a bowl of batter with disdain. "You'll end up stuck to the Aga." She followed a recipe torn from a magazine, an overcomplicated affair promising a sponge fit for royalty. The instructions mentioned folding, which Agatha took literally, bending the mixture as though it were origami. 2 cigarettes and 1 gin later, she shoved the tin into the oven and stood back with grim satisfaction. It was during this hopeful pause that Charles Fraith rang. "Agatha, darling, you busy?" "Yes," she snapped. "I'm elbow-deep in sponge." "My condolences. Thought I'd warn you. The Burford lot play dirty. Professional bakers sneaking into the amateur round, that sort of thing. Terribly cutthroat, all in the name of sponge." "Then they'll meet their match," Agatha said stoutly, though the smell from the oven suggested otherwise. When the timer finally rang, she pulled out what looked like a paving slab. Smoke drifted upward in lazy curls. Hodge fled under the sofa. Agatha set the blackened mass on the counter and stared. Perhaps it's supposed to be rustic. The doorbell rang. Doris Simpson again, armed with nosiness. "Just popped in to see how it's going, dear." "Oh, my word, is that it?" "It's experimental," Agatha said. "A sort of Mediterranean sponge." "More of a Cotswold brick," Doris murmured. Agatha's temper flared. "Out!" she barked, grabbing the cake tin with bare hands. She dropped it instantly. It was still scorching, and watched in fury as it broke cleanly in 2, revealing a soggy grey interior. By evening, her pride was as deflated as her sponge. She stuffed the remains into the bin, downed another gin, and declared, "Never again." But Agatha Raisin's never-agains had the life expectancy of mayflies. The next morning, after a night of restless plotting, she drove to Burford with the vague plan of research. Burford, with its golden stone high street and ornamental hanging baskets, was already humming. She found Le Pain Divin halfway down, a patisserie gleaming like a Parisian jewel in a row of modest tea shops. Inside, light spilled through the glass display case, glinting off croissants so glossy they looked lacquered. Behind the counter stood Edward Parsons, tall, dark-haired and radiating easy confidence. His sleeves were rolled, his smile practiced. "Good morning, madam," he said. "What may I tempt you with?" Agatha, suddenly conscious of her raincoat and wind-blown hair, gestured vaguely. "Something impressive. I'm entering a bake-off." "Ah," his eyes warmed. "A brave soul. The bake-off judges fear me, you know." "Do they now?" she said archly. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "They prefer tradition, and I bring artistry. They call me arrogant, but excellence always offends the provincial." Agatha almost purred. Here, at last, was someone who spoke her language. "I quite agree. The village mind is so small it squeaks." Edward laughed, offering her a delicate slice of almond tart. "Try this. You'll never look at sponges again." She took a bite and nearly sighed, but the sweetness was shadowed by something else. Tension. As Edward turned to greet another customer, his smile tightened. A woman had entered, a stocky figure in a flour-dusted apron. "Well," the woman said, voice sharp as a knife, "if it isn't Monsieur Parsons, spreading his Parisian fairy dust again." Edward's smile thinned. "Millie," he said, tone cool, "still baking your rustic lumps?" "At least mine don't taste of chemicals," she snapped and marched out. Agatha blinked. "Friend of yours?" "Rival," he said smoothly. "Jealousy is an occupational hazard in this business." She noted the faint tremor in his hand as he arranged pastries. Beneath the charm a nerve was twitching. Outside, the bells of Burford church chimed. Agatha lingered, peering back through the window. Edward was speaking rapidly into a phone, back-turned. The warmth had gone from his posture. Back in her car, she lit a cigarette and watched the smoke curl against the windscreen. Something about him was too perfect, like spun sugar waiting to crack. A small clue glinted in her mind. The scent of almonds had lingered on her fingers far longer than it should have. She exhaled slowly. "Charming men and almond tarts," she murmured. "Both look lovely till they burn." Hodge, waiting at home, would have understood. That night, in the still kitchen, she stared at her empty counter and muttered, "Next time I'll show them all." Then she struck a match for another cigarette, its small flame flickering over the discarded recipe. The paper curled, browned, and folded in on itself, exactly like her sponge. The Cotswold sun had a way of making even the laziest street look industrious. Burford's market square glittered that morning, stalls piled with bread, chutneys, and women armed with tote bags and opinions. Agatha Raisin, dressed in her most flattering navy jacket and a hat she hoped looked Parisian, stepped from her car with the determined air of one who was definitely not here to snoop. "Research," she muttered, lighting a cigarette. "Purely professional curiosity." In truth, she had spent the past evening imagining Edward Parsons' smile, the warm, conspiratorial one that suggested she was the only clever woman in Gloucestershire. She told herself she only wanted to sample his baking for competitive insight, a lie so thin it could barely hold its own crust. Inside Le Pain Divin, the air shimmered with butter and envy. Glass cases gleamed with éclairs, millefeuilles, and tarts that could make a saint break a diet. Edward appeared from the back room, flour-dusted sleeves rolled to reveal toned forearms that made Agatha forget her age by at least 10 years. "Mrs. Raisin, or may I call you Agatha?" "You may," she said, straightening, "though I'm here in an official capacity, Castley's Bake-Off entry." He smiled, that knowing smile again. "Then you must taste what you're up against." He offered her an éclair with the reverence of a priest offering communion. She bit delicately, then less delicately, and nearly purred. "Not bad," she said, trying to sound unimpressed. "Though I prefer something with more character." "Character," he repeated, amused. "In pastry, that's often code for dense." Before she could reply, the door jingled violently. A stocky woman in a flour-spattered pinafore charged in, cheeks flushed with righteous indignation. "Don't you smirk at me, Parsons," she said. "You know very well you owe me £50 for those butter orders, and don't pretend you can't pay." Agatha froze mid-bite. Edward's tone turned silken. "Ah, Miss Sharp. Still confusing quality with quantity, I see." Millie Sharp snorted. "You call that French nonsense quality? Half the village says your croissants are bought frozen from some supplier in Oxford. That, he said, lowering his voice, is slander. Agatha, who had been leaning far too close to the counter, coughed loudly and pretended to inspect a tray of buns. Milly turned on her. And who might you be, then? Agatha Raisin, Carsley Women's Institute, she said briskly, as if announcing authority. Another amateur with delusions of sponge, Milly muttered, stomping out. Edward exhaled through his teeth. She's harmless, he said. Jealous, bitter, and harmless. Harmless people rarely shout about gas bills in public, Agatha observed. He laughed and refilled her coffee cup. You're sharp, Agatha. You'd make a good detective. She almost choked on her sip. Heaven forbid. I've seen what happens to people who poke their noses into village trouble. Ah, he said softly. But you do poke, don't you? Before she could answer, a flamboyant voice sliced through the air. Darling Aggie, don't tell me you've gone continental without me. Roy Silver swept into the shop like a storm in silk. His sunglasses were large enough to require planning permission. He kissed Agatha's cheek with exaggerated flair and turned to Edward. Roy Silver, London PR. Perhaps you've heard of me. Edward blinked. Should I have? Roy looked delighted. No, but it's always nice when people think they should. Agatha sighed. Roy's here on business, she said. He's doing a little feature, Village Talent, the Hidden Cotswolds. Indeed, Roy beamed. We're filming a segment tomorrow. Picture it. Sepia tones, slow pans over sponge cakes. You could be the romantic element, Aggie. Agatha coloured faintly. Don't be absurd. Charles Fraith arrived not long after, perfectly timed as ever. He sauntered in, tan impeccable, hair defying gravity. Thought I'd see the show, he said lazily. Roy told me you were consorting with a baker. I had to confirm it wasn't a euphemism. Go away, Charles, Agatha said. Some of us take our civic duties seriously. Charles surveyed the eclairs. Civic duty looks delicious. Agatha ignored him, though her lips twitched. Edward basked in the attention like a cat near a fire. For a moment the whole thing felt absurdly festive, until a shadow passed across the window. Milly Sharp stood outside, watching. Her expression was unreadable, but the set of her shoulders suggested she wasn't done with Edward Parsons. Later, at the market square, Agatha and her companions wandered among stalls while Roy chattered about camera angles. The village was buzzing. Burford's famous butter versus olive oil debate had reached new heights of pettiness. Housewives bickered about authenticity while tourists snapped photos of honey jars. Agatha spotted Edward again, arguing quietly with Milly near the cheese stall. She slowed, pretending to admire a row of chutneys. I told you, I'm not giving it back, Edward hissed. You signed the recipe over when you left the cooperative. It was my grandmother's recipe, Milly's voice cracked. You've no right. Edward leaned close, words too low to hear. Whatever he said made Milly's face blanch. She turned abruptly and stormed away, vanishing into the crowd. Agatha lingered, frowning. Charles appeared beside her. Eavesdropping again? I call it investigative curiosity, she said. He's hiding something. Charles shrugged. Probably an affair or a tax bill. Most men are. Don't be flippant, he smiled. You wouldn't find me attractive if I weren't. Agatha sniffed. Who says I do? But her mind was already elsewhere, on the flicker of fear she'd glimpsed in Milly's eyes. That evening, back in Carsley, Hodge wound round her ankles as she poured herself a gin. The news came over the local radio. Tragedy in Burford tonight. Local baker Milly Sharp found dead in her shop. Police are treating the incident as suspicious. Agatha froze mid-sip. The words hung in the quiet kitchen like smoke. She sank into a chair, the gin untouched. Outside, the drizzle began, a soft hiss against the window pane. Hodge leapt onto the table, tail flicking as if to punctuate the silence. Well, Agatha murmured, lighting a cigarette, so much for harmless. She drew deeply, the tip glowing like a tiny warning light in the gloom. Then, with her usual stubbornness, she stubbed it out and said aloud, I'm not getting involved. Hodge yawned. Absolutely not, she repeated. But her eyes drifted to the newspaper beside her, the Bake-Off notice with Edward's smiling face. The ink around his name had smudged as if dampened by rain, or by her curiosity. She sighed. Oh, damn it. The cat stretched luxuriously, unconcerned. Agatha rose, fetched her handbag, and muttered, If it's research, it doesn't count as meddling. Outside, the drizzle thickened into proper English rain, soft, persistent, and faintly smug, as though it knew she'd never resist. Carsley woke beneath a shroud of pale fog, the sort that crept into hedges and made everything look faintly uncertain. The village post office smelled of damp paper and speculation. By 9:30, Doris Simpson had already told 3 people that the Burford baker had gassed herself in despair. By 10, Mrs. Bloxby was quietly suggesting they wait for facts, and by 10:30, Agatha Raisin was slamming the Evesham Echo onto her kitchen table, scaring Hodge off his breakfast saucer. "Burford baker found dead. Suicide or sabotage," Agatha read aloud. "Good grief, can't journalists ever write without italics?" Hodge yawned in silent disapproval. Agatha poured herself instant coffee and lit a cigarette, the smoke curling lazily in the mist leaking through her open window. She told herself she wasn't shocked. Murder had a way of stalking her hobbies, yet something about Millie Sharp's death nagged at her like an unbaked sponge. The doorbell rang, brisk and official. Bill Wong, in his practical mackintosh, stood there holding a paper bag from the bakery. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," he said. "Brought you a croissant. From Burford. Free samples for the police." "Bribery," she said, taking it anyway. "Come in. I was just about to pontificate about death over coffee." Bill followed her in, removing his cap. He sat gingerly as if the furniture might gossip. "You've heard, I take it?" "Who hasn't? Doris says Millie did herself in because her eclairs were soggy." "She didn't," Agatha looked up sharply. "Ah," Bill sighed. "Off the record. Post-mortem found traces of cyanide, hidden in almond essence. Someone helped her along before the gas ever got to her." Agatha whistled. "Poisoned almonds. How literary. You'll have Christie spinning in her grave." "You didn't hear it from me," he said. "And before you ask, yes, we're questioning Edward Parsons." Agatha made a small, triumphant noise. "The charming one with the smirk. I knew it. Too handsome to be decent." Bill looked weary. "Don't start meddling, Agatha. We've got enough confusion already. Half of Burford's bakers hate each other. They compete over butter brands." "Butter reveals character," she said solemnly. "The honest use it unsalted. Promise me you'll stay out of it." "Of course," she lied, stubbing out her cigarette. He gave her a long, resigned look and left with his coffee half finished. Hodge returned to his saucer. Agatha glanced at the croissant, sniffed it suspiciously and muttered, "If I die mysteriously before lunch, it's his fault." By noon, the drizzle had thickened into moral disapproval. Carsley's residents were already spinning theories in the Red Lion. Agatha, pretending to post a letter, caught fragments through the doorway. Poor Millie, she was always temperamental. They say she owed money. No, the Frenchman did it. Jealousy, I heard. She folded the envelope she hadn't written and walked straight to her car. Burford's police cordon had been lifted, but the bakery windows were taped with grey crosses. She peered in at the empty shelves. The ghost of almond still hung in the air, sweet, artificial, faintly cloying. She shivered. "Agatha!" Edward Parsons appeared behind her, looking dishevelled and heartbreakingly tragic. His usually neat hair was ruffled, his white shirt open at the collar. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and strained. "Neither should you," she retorted. He gave a thin smile. "I had to see it. Millie and I weren't friends, but it's dreadful." "Indeed," she said. "You two quarrelled yesterday at the market. Over money, I believe." He winced. "Gossip travels faster than yeast. It was nothing. She accused me of stealing a recipe. Ridiculous. Millie was, well, volatile." "Poisonous, apparently," said Agatha dryly. He stared at her. "You think I killed her?" "I think everyone's lying, including you." A silence stretched between them. The fog pressed closer. Finally, he said quietly, "Come to the shop tonight, after closing. There are things I need to explain, but not here." "How thrillingly suspicious," Agatha said. "Shall I bring my solicitor or my undertaker?" He didn't smile. "Just yourself." She watched him walk away, shoes splashing in puddles, coat flapping like a guilty conscience. Back home, she poured herself a gin and stared at the kitchen clock. Mrs. Bloxby rang, gentle as ever. "I hear you've been to Burford," said the vicar's wife. "News spreads faster than mould," Agatha replied. "Be careful, dear. Bill's worried you'll get involved again." "Involved? Me? I'm simply concerned for justice." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "You always are. until it gets personal. Agatha smiled despite herself. You make me sound sentimental. Not sentimental, Agatha. Brave. Though bravery and curiosity do look awfully alike from a distance. When the call ended, the house felt too quiet. Hodge sat watching her with that feline judgment only cats possess. Don't look at me like that, she told him. I'm not going to his bakery, probably. He blinked. By dusk she was driving again. Burford's lamps flickered through the mist, and Le Pain Divin glowed faintly behind drawn blinds. She parked in an alley and approached the side door. It was ajar. Inside, the shop smelled of sugar and something acrid beneath, cleaning chemicals or fear. The counters gleamed, immaculate. Edward stood by the ovens, sleeves rolled, face pale. You came, he said. I wasn't sure you would. I'm naturally drawn to danger, said Agatha. It's my curse. He gestured to a tray of tarts. Taste one. You'll see why I couldn't have poisoned Millie. I use synthetic almond essence, not natural. No cyanide risk. She hesitated. You could have switched later. He shook his head. I'd never harm anyone. She was threatening me, yes, but... He stopped, staring past her. What? He smiled faintly, though his eyes looked hollow. Nothing. You remind me of my mother. She liked to interrogate people too. Agatha set down the tart. I'm not your mother, and I don't like being patronized. He stepped closer. I only meant you're clever. Sharp. The others here. They gossip, but you see things. Her pulse fluttered with vanity and unease. Flattery won't distract me from murder, Mr. Parsons. He leaned on the counter. Then perhaps something sweeter will. From beneath he brought out a small box. Eclair, glistening like temptation itself. For you, he said. No poison, I promise. How comforting, she said. He laughed softly. You think me guilty, but the truth's far messier. There are debts, jealousies, business partners. People would kill for less than my reputation. Including you? His smile faltered. Including me, he said quietly. Then he reached to close the box. But not this time. A bell tinkled outside. Someone passing or listening. Agatha turned sharply, but the street beyond was empty. When she looked back, Edward's charm was restored, polished and effortless. You should go before the police see you here. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll have a private tasting. I can explain properly then. Agatha hesitated. Something about the precision of his words felt rehearsed. Tomorrow, then, she said slowly. She left with the box of eclairs tucked under her arm, feeling absurdly like a spy carrying evidence. Back in Castley, she found herself unable to eat them. The sweet smell of almonds clung to her fingers, stubborn as guilt. She sat at the window, rain pattering softly, cigarette glowing in the dark. He's hiding something, Hodge, she murmured, either a secret or himself. The cat stretched, unconcerned. She smiled faintly. And I'm pretending not to care, which means I'm already in trouble. The fog pressed against the glass like a secret waiting to be told. The night air in Burford had that faint, yeasty warmth that clings to baking towns. Agatha Raisin's heels clicked on the cobbles as she approached Le Pain Divin. The street was quiet, shop windows shuttered, and the faint smell of pastry still floated from Edward Parsons' bakery like a lingering boast. She told herself this was merely reconnaissance, not folly. If the man happens to pour champagne and confess all, so much the better, she muttered, tugging her coat tighter. Inside, the bakery glowed golden. Edward had transformed it for his private tasting. Tablecloths, candles, and a platter of petits fours that looked too delicate to eat. He appeared from the kitchen, sleeves rolled, tie gone, eyes bright with the confidence of a man who knew he looked devastating under low light. Agatha, he said warmly, you came. Purely in the interest of justice, she said, and possibly profiteroles. He laughed, opening champagne. The pop echoed in the little shop. To courage, he said, handing her a glass. To survival, she replied, clinking. The bubbles went to her head faster than dignity allowed. Edward leaned on the counter, voice soft. You think I'm hiding something? Everyone in this town thinks so. Everyone in this town thinks everyone's hiding something, said Agatha. It's what keeps us sociable. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't kill Millie. Of course not, she said smoothly. You were too busy organising tastings. A pause. The air thickened. He turned away to adjust a tray of eclair, and she saw, half hidden beneath a ledger book, a folded sheet of paper marked with columns of initials, amounts, and strange little circles. Her curiosity, that incorrigible demon, stirred. "What's that?" she asked. "Just accounts," he said, a touch too fast. He moved the ledger, but not before she saw one entry. MS, £300, D as Millie Sharp. "How tidy," said Agatha. "I wish my books looked so mathematical." He gave her a long look. "You'd be surprised what patterns you find when you track human appetites." "Oh, I'm rarely surprised," she said, though her heart was hammering. A soft knock at the door broke the tension. Edward frowned. "Delivery. Wait here." He crossed to the back, unlocking a side door. A boy in a leather jacket stood there, clutching a parcel wrapped in greaseproof. They spoke in low voices. Edward's tone, once charming, turned sharp. Agatha couldn't resist. She slipped behind the counter, flipping open the ledger for a peek. Rows of initials ran down the page. Not just customers, but what looked like coded transactions. BW, CF, and a symbol she recognized as the Greek letter delta beside each. At the bottom, faint smudges of flour and what might have been red ink or not ink at all. Looking for recipes, she jumped. Edward was back, expression cold. "You're remarkably curious for someone who isn't investigating." "Old habits," she said, forcing a smile. "Journalistic training." "You're not a journalist." "Then detective instinct. Comes from reading too many Christie novels." He took the ledger and shut it with quiet finality. "Mrs. Raisin, I invited you for company, not interrogation." "Interrogation? Oh, I'd need a brighter light for that." He didn't laugh. The easy charm had vanished, replaced by something wary. "I think perhaps this evening is over." Agatha picked up her coat with what she hoped was dignity. "Of course. Wouldn't want to overmix the batter." As she reached the door, he said, almost softly, "Don't go poking where it hurts, Agatha. Some ingredients turn bitter when stirred." "And some rise beautifully," she said, and stepped into the night. The street was dark except for one pool of lamplight. Somewhere a car engine ticked. Agatha hesitated, the hair prickling at her neck. Across the road, a Morris Minor sat half in shadow, the driver's silhouette barely visible. The engine coughed once, then fell silent. "Edward's admirer, perhaps," she muttered. But as she started towards her car, the silhouette shifted. A flash of movement, the glow of a cigarette. Someone was watching. She got in and locked the doors, pretending calm while her pulse drummed. The Morris Minor's headlights blinked once, then went out. When she finally drove off, it didn't follow, but the unease stayed with her all the way back to Carsley. At home, she fed Hodge and poured herself a gin. The clock ticked too loudly. On the table lay her handbag, and from its flap a small corner of paper peeked out. She froze. In her hurry to leave, she'd torn off a scrap of the ledger, the bit marked "Da." She hadn't meant to, at least not consciously, but her fingers must have done what her curiosity commanded. She unfolded it. The symbols looked like nonsense. Circles, triangles, a few numbers. But one line caught her attention. MS. £300. Paid. B. She frowned. B for Bill. Impossible. Or Burford? Bakery? She tried to tell herself it was coincidence, but coincidences had a habit of knocking on her door with muddy shoes. The phone rang. She jumped, sloshing gin onto the carpet. "Mrs. Raisin?" Edward's voice, smooth again, but too careful. "I wanted to apologize. I was rude earlier. It's been a dreadful week." "Perfectly understandable," she said, mopping the spill. "Dead bodies can spoil one's manners." He hesitated. "Tomorrow evening. Another tasting, I insist. I'll explain everything properly." "You do realize inviting me again looks terribly suspicious." "Perhaps I like suspicious women." "And perhaps I like caution," she said. He chuckled. 8 o'clock, then?" Before she could protest, the line went dead. Agatha stood for a moment, staring at the receiver, then at Hodge, who had taken up his usual post of moral superiority on the windowsill. "Don't judge me," she said. "It's for evidence, not romance." The cat blinked, unimpressed. She sighed, lighting a cigarette. The smoke rose, twisting like a question mark. "A man with charm, a ledger with blood, and a car that watches from the dark," she murmured. "And me, fool enough to go back for seconds." The cigarette burned down between her fingers. She stubbed it out, poured another gin, and said to the cat, "Next time you're coming with me. You've more sense than I do." Outside, the drizzle began again. Light, persistent, the sound of a secret refusing to stay buried. Carsley had seen its share of scandals, from missing vicars' wives to jam competitions ending in tears, but nothing quite compared to waking up and finding Agatha Raisin on the front page of the Evesham Echo. Her photograph, taken at an unflattering angle, beamed above the headline, "Agatha Raisin investigates the Cotswold killer." Agatha nearly dropped her toast. Hodge, crouched on the table, took the opportunity to swipe a pawful of marmalade. "Roy Silver," she said through gritted teeth. "I'll kill him before the murderer gets a chance." She jabbed the article with one manicured finger. Local sleuth Agatha Raisin vows to bring justice to Burford's baker's feud. Below it was a glamorous studio photo of Roy himself, grinning like a cat with cream. The phone rang. She snatched it up. "You've seen it, haven't you?" came Roy's delighted voice. "Seen it? You've turned a murder investigation into a pantomime." "Public interest, darling. People love a stylish sleuth. I've already had calls from Midlands today. They might send a van." "A van won't be the only thing they send if Bill Wong gets wind of this." "Oh, stop worrying," Roy trilled. "Any publicity is good publicity. Besides, your cheekbones photograph beautifully." She slammed down the receiver and glared at Hodge. "Cheekbones! I look like I'm about to devour the press." A soft knock interrupted her rage. Mrs. Bloxby entered, serene as always, holding a tray of scones. "I thought you might need fortification," she said. "What I need is restraint, preferably for Roy." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "You did rather invite attention, Agatha. Reporters wouldn't follow if there wasn't a story to tell." "Oh, don't you start moralizing. I didn't ask to be poster girl for murder." "No, but you did attend an after-hours rendezvous with a suspected killer," the vicar's wife said gently. "And in Burford, that counts as advertising." Agatha's blush deepened. She busied herself buttering a scone with unnecessary aggression. "It's not that sort of story," she muttered. Mrs. Bloxby's tone softened. "Just be careful, dear. Vanity can make us braver than wisdom would advise." By noon, the circus was in full swing. A press van from Cheltenham parked near the Red Lion, while a herd of curious locals milled about with expressions ranging from awe to envy. Agatha marched down the lane, chin high, trailed by Doris Simpson, who announced to anyone listening that she was Agatha's domestic consultant. Charles Fraith arrived in his vintage convertible, parking with aristocratic flair. He leaned out, grinning. "Well, Aggie, I see fame suits you. I've wagered £10 with the landlord that you'll solve this before the police." "Kindly wager on horses, not me," she said. "Nonsense. You've always had better odds." Bill Wong appeared then, grim-faced and rumpled, his patience clearly evaporating. "Agatha," he said, voice low but loaded, "we need to talk, privately." They ducked into the Red Lion, where the landlord served them tea under a framed photo of the village cricket team. "You've created chaos," Bill said flatly. "Every gossip in the county is calling the station. Roy Silver told the BBC you're consulting with us." "Consulting is a generous word," said Agatha, lighting a cigarette. "So is helping. For heaven's sake, Aggie, this is a criminal investigation, not a fan club." "If your lot solved crimes faster, there wouldn't be fan clubs." Bill rubbed his temples. "I should have seen this coming. You attract attention like sugar attracts wasps." "Thank you," she said sweetly. He sighed. "All right then. Since you're in it, you might as well know we've traced Millie's payments. She was buying butter, a lot of it, from a supplier in France who doesn't exist." "So the Frenchman's imaginary," Agatha mused. "That's wonderfully suspicious." "More likely a front for black market imports. Someone's been smuggling cheap substitutes and labelling them as artisanal. Millie found out, tried to expose it, and got silenced." Agatha blew smoke thoughtfully. "And our charming Edward was the importer?" "Possibly, or someone close to him. We're still digging," she smirked. "So am I." Bill groaned. "Just promise me you won't turn it into another media stunt." "I promise nothing," she said brightly, and left before he could stop her. By late afternoon, Burford's high street looked like a fete gone wrong. Reporters prowled with microphones while locals tried to sell them scones. Agatha spotted Roy giving an impromptu interview outside Le Pain Divan, gesturing dramatically. "The Cotswolds," he declared to the camera, where murder meets meringue. Agatha marched up and yanked him by the elbow. "Are you mad?" she hissed. "Darling, you're trending." "We don't trend in the Cotswolds. We simmer quietly until someone explodes." The cameraman snorted, clearly enjoying himself. "You're barred from my case," Agatha snapped. "Too late," Roy said cheerfully. "You're national news." She stalked off, cheeks burning, and nearly collided with Charles. "Enjoying your celebrity?" he drawled. "Oh, shut up." "Only trying to help. I brought something useful. My friend at the county archive found references to butter imports under a shell company. The initials match your ledger scrap." He handed her a folded fax. Agatha scanned it. "Borden Limited, London. Importer of French dairy substitutes." "Borden," she repeated. "That's the B from my note." "Bravo," said Charles. "Shall we celebrate with a drink? Or a raid?" "A raid, then a drink." They drove out of Burford toward the old Creamery Road, following a rumour that one of Edward's deliveries came from a warehouse there. The countryside rolled by, damp and luminous after rain. Sheep watched them pass with their usual contempt. At the creamery gates they found only silence and a few stacked crates marked Borden Limited. Agatha pried one open. Inside, foil-wrapped blocks of butter stamped Produits de France, though the labels looked suspiciously homemade. "Fake imports," she murmured. "He's been padding profits with margarine and calling it French." "A hanging offence in these parts," said Charles. A car engine growled behind them. They turned, but whoever it was reversed swiftly down the lane and vanished. "Someone doesn't like spectators," Charles said. "Then we're getting close." Back in Burford, dusk fell over the square. Agatha's triumph soured when she found her car waiting outside Le Pain de Vin, tyres slashed neatly, all four. She stared in disbelief. Oh, for heaven's sake, who vandalizes a woman's car for investigating dairy? Charles whistled softly. "Looks like you've annoyed the wrong cow." "I'll give them a war, all right," she muttered. Roy appeared again, holding a cappuccino and looking thrilled. "Darling, reporters adore the tyre drama. I told them you're being silenced by a dairy cartel." "Roy, go home before I strangle you with a baguette." "Oh, don't be ungrateful. Fame needs narrative." Bill arrived moments later, exasperated beyond measure. "Right. You, me, the station, now." "Can't. I'm under attack," Agatha said, gesturing at the car. He bent to inspect it. "Clean cut, professional, not random vandalism. Someone's warning you off." "Splendid," she said. "Means I'm right." "Means you're reckless," he retorted. "Stay in Castley for a few days." "And let them win? Never." Mrs. Bloxby phoned that evening, having heard about the butter war from Doris, who'd heard it from the Red Lion barman, who'd seen it on the telly. "Dear Agatha," she said kindly, "perhaps this is the time to remember the virtue of patience." Agatha sat on her sofa, gin in hand, staring at the deflated tyre marks still on her shoes. "Patience is overrated," she said. "If I'd been patient, I'd still be in PR pretending to like people." "Even so," Mrs. Bloxby said, "you might try liking yourself a little more. It would hurt less when others don't." That silenced her. After they hung up, Agatha sat a long time in the half-dark. Hodge jumped onto her lap, settling with imperious weight. She stroked his fur absently, mind replaying the day, the ledger, the crates, Edward's warning. "Black market butter," she said aloud. "Who'd have thought murder could be so domestic?" Hodge purred, unconcerned. "All right," she sighed, lighting a cigarette. "Tomorrow, we find out who's been spreading margarine and murder in equal measure." The smoke curled above her like a ghost of ambition, thin and persistent. Rain swept across the Cotswolds in long, slanting lines that turned the hedgerows to silver. Agatha Raisin sat in the passenger seat of Charles Frayth's vintage convertible, muttering about drafts and death. "If I die of pneumonia," she said, clutching her scarf, "you'll be charged with manslaughter." Charles gave her a lazy grin. "You'll survive, Aggie. You're far too stubborn for pneumonia." "You're enjoying this," she said, "immensely. It's not every day I get to play gallant rescuer. Besides, Evesham has decent pubs and dreadful coffee, two things that seem to suit you." She shot him a glare, but the edge of her lips softened. Charles had a way of irritating her just enough to distract from her fear. The rain thickened as they rolled into Evesham, market stalls already shuttered. They ducked into the Green Man, an old coaching inn that smelled of ale, wet coats and promise. Inside, the fire snapped cheerfully. Agatha ordered shepherd's pie and a gin. Charles ordered the same, but with wine, claiming gin was for women of mystery and midlife crisis. "You're 2 for 2, she said. Halfway through their meal, the door opened, admitting a woman who looked like a warning label for romance, perfectly coiffed, dripping confidence, and old enough to have learned how to use it. She spotted Edward Parsons' name in the paper on Agatha's table and gave a delicate laugh. "So he's at it again," the woman said. My, still spinning his sugar webs." Agatha looked up sharply. "You know him?" The woman slid into the next booth uninvited. "Clarissa Parsons, ex-wife. He's still calling himself Le Pain Divin, is he? It used to be our bakery. Then he decided my croissant recipe wasn't modern enough for his ambitions." "You were the real baker?" asked Agatha. "Of course. Edward couldn't fold pastry if his life depended on it. What he could do was fold banknotes into disappearing acts." Charles raised a brow. "He stole your recipe and your profits?" "And my sanity for a while," said Clarissa, swirling her wine. "He gambled everything we had. Cards, horses, God knows what else. Then he ran off, opened shop in Burford, and reinvented himself as a genius pâtissier." Agatha's mind ticked. Gambling debts. That could be motive. Clarissa gave her a long, knowing look. "If someone's finally put an end to his nonsense, I can't say I'm shocked. He never knew when to stop." "He's not dead," Agatha said. "Millie Sharp is." Clarissa blinked, then smiled faintly. "Then the wrong person died, though I expect Edward's at the centre of it as usual. He's always been drawn to trouble like a fly to honey." A waitress approached with the bill, and Clarissa stood. "If you see him, tell him Clarissa sends her regards, and that his French butter was never French at all." She left behind the scent of expensive perfume and resentment. Charles whistled softly. "That's one ex-wife you don't invite to tea." Agatha frowned. She could be lying. "Probably," he said cheerfully, "but wasn't she marvellous? You'd get on splendidly if you weren't both armed." Agatha ignored that. "Butter again. She mentioned it. And the fake French supplier. It ties back to the ledger." "Ledger?" "Never you mind," she said. "Trade secret." "Aggie, if you're hoarding evidence again, don't start. You'll only get in the way of my brilliance." He grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it. But brilliance does tend to attract bullets." They left the pub under umbrellas that proved decorative rather than functional. By the time Charles's car sputtered back toward Castley, Agatha's hair had surrendered to damp curls. "You look fetching," Charles said. "If you value your fingers, keep them on the wheel," she replied. Back home, she changed into dry clothes and sat at her kitchen table, ledger scraps spread out before her like a treasure map. Hodge leapt onto the chair beside her, tail twitching. "Don't smudge it," she warned. The coded markings, circles, triangles, and initials, looked meaningless until she remembered something Clarissa had said. "He gambled everything we had." French initials, a circle with a dot through it. She reached for her dictionary. The circle might be O, for Opale Banque, a French institution she vaguely recalled from an old travel brochure. She turned the paper over, scribbling notes. Borden Lutted linked to Opale Banque. Both pointed to Edward's supposed imports. Money laundering, smuggling, a black market network hidden under puff pastry. Her pulse quickened. She picked up the phone and dialed Bill Wong's number. He answered wearily. "Please tell me you're not on telly again." "Better. I've got proof Edward Parsons is lying. The ledger's coded in French banking terms. He's using fake butter shipments to move money abroad." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Agatha, you can't just ring me with criminal conspiracies after bedtime. It's 8:30. That's bedtime for police paperwork. Don't you see? Clarissa said he gambled. He needed cash. Millie must have found out. He killed her to shut her up." "Possibly," said Bill. "Or possibly you're overexcited by carbohydrates. Come to my house, I'll show you." "Tomorrow," he said firmly. "Stay out of trouble till then." She hung up, muttering, "As if trouble needs an invitation." Outside, wind rattled the windows. Hodge pawed at the ledger scrap, revealing a faint smear of reddish-brown beneath the ink. Agatha leaned closer. Rust, or dried blood. The thought prickled her scalp. She fetched a magnifying glass and studied it, but her concentration broke when the phone rang again. "If that's Bill changing his mind," she said, grabbing the receiver. "I'm—" "Agatha?" Edward's voice. She froze. "You've some nerve ringing me after threatening me last time." "Please," he said, his tone ragged. "I need help. They're watching me. I didn't kill Millie, but someone wants me to disappear. Who's they? The line crackled. Meet me tomorrow. Then the call cut off. Agatha dialed back, but there was no answer. She tried again. The operator's cool voice informed her the number was temporarily disconnected. Damn, she muttered. She poured herself a gin, sat down and stared at the receiver as though it might explain itself. Charles rang not long after. Just checking you haven't been murdered. Not yet. Edward called. He's in trouble, or pretending to be. Pretending sounds more his style. Maybe, but he sounded scared. You'd be scared too if you'd crossed a woman like Clarissa. You're implying she killed Millie? I'm implying everyone's capable of something dreadful if properly motivated. You, for example, could kill over a Bakewell tart. Don't be ridiculous, said Agatha. It would have to be a lemon drizzle. She hung up before he could reply and turned the ledger scrap over in her fingers. The ink had blurred where Hodge's paw had brushed it, revealing one last detail she'd missed, the faint outline of a second name beneath the code, E. Parsons. You fool, she whispered. You've signed your own alibi. Hodge meowed, unimpressed by human folly. Agatha leaned back, exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. The rain had eased, but the house still felt too large, too quiet. She looked at the cat. Well, Hodge, it seems our charming baker's vanished into thin air, and if Bill won't do something, I'll have to. Hodge blinked slowly, then curled into a ball, indifferent to the moral complexities of crime. Agatha lit a cigarette, watching the smoke twist toward the ceiling. She exhaled sharply. Men, she said, they're either running from women or running from debts, usually both. Outside, the wind rattled the gate, and the kettle clicked off with a sigh. Agatha poured herself another gin, telling herself she'd rest, but the ledger scrap stayed open on the table, whispering possibilities. By the time she finally rose, the house was still except for Hodge's steady purr and the faint tap of rain on the glass. Somewhere in Burford, Edward Parsons was either hiding or already beyond reach, and Agatha Raisin, who never knew when to stop, was already planning her next move. The Cotswold night was a quiet conspiracy of drizzle and moonlight. It spread across the fields in a thin silver sheen, making every puddle glimmer like a guilty conscience. Agatha Raisin drove through it with the determined grip of a woman who suspected everyone except herself. If this car ends up in a ditch, she said grimly, I'm haunting you. Bill Wong, calm as ever in the passenger seat, said, You're the one driving, Agatha. Exactly. You'll deserve it for making me. They were following a faint lead, Edward Parsons' delivery van, last seen heading toward the abandoned dairy on the Burford road. Bill's contact at the station had caught it on a late-night patrol, parked where no sane baker should be. You could have waited until morning, Bill said. And let him escape with his butter and his conscience, she snapped. Not likely. The car bumped along the rutted lane, headlights cutting through mist. A sagging sign loomed ahead, Merivale Creamery, closed by order of the council. Charming, Agatha muttered. Smells like a cow's last breath. They parked by the gate. Bill climbed out first, torch in hand, his breath steaming in the cold. Agatha followed, heels sinking into mud. The air reeked of ammonia and damp plaster. Inside the broken building, moonlight streamed through holes in the roof. Metal churns sat like ghosts under sheets of dust. Somewhere deeper, water dripped, slow, steady, accusing. Bill whispered, Stay close. Not a problem, she said. I'd cling to your arm if I thought it would help. It won't, he said, dry as chalk. They moved carefully through the shadows. A faint hum came from a back room. Bill pushed open the door. Inside, crates were stacked to the ceiling, pale blocks wrapped in foil marked Produit de France. Agatha leaned closer. Smells wrong, she said, more chemical than creamy. Bill unwrapped one. The block beneath glistened oddly, slick and translucent. Not butter, he said, some synthetic fat substitute. That explains the ledgers. Smuggled in, sold as luxury imports. So Edward wasn't just a flirt, Agatha murmured. He was an entrepreneur in crime. She crouched to inspect the labels. A faint symbol appeared near the corner, a circle with a dot through it. She remembered it from her ledger scrap. Same mark, she whispered. The French bank code. Before Bill could answer, a sharp sound sliced the stillness, a footstep, deliberate and close. He motioned for silence. They ducked behind a stack of crates. The door creaked. A figure entered, torch beam cutting across the churns. He moved with purpose, dragging a small trolley. "Delivery," Agatha mouthed. The man whistled softly, a tune too jaunty for the setting. He lifted one crate, then froze, noticing the unwrapped foil. Bill stepped out, voice firm. "Police, stay where you are." The man spun round, panic flaring. A gunshot cracked, deafening in the echoing space. Agatha yelped, dropping behind a crate. Bill ducked, drawing his revolver. "Don't shoot," she hissed. "You'll ruin my hair." "Stay down." The intruder bolted for the side door. Bill charged after him. Agatha, torn between bravery and common sense, followed at a safer distance. Outside, the man leapt into a Morris Minor, engines spluttering to life. Bill fired one warning shot, and, miraculously, the car swerved, skidding into a ditch. By the time Agatha caught up, Bill had the driver pinned against the bonnet, torch beam revealing a narrow, ferret-faced man in his 50s. "Len Price," Bill said, recognizing him. "Ex-chef. Fired by Millie Sharp 2 years ago." "She said he stole from her," Agatha added, breathless. "A petty thief turned courier. Perfect." "For what?" "For smuggling fake butter and shooting at people, apparently." Len wheezed. "Wasn't shooting at you. It went off by accident." "Oh, do be original," Agatha snapped. "Everyone says that after they've aimed straight at me." Bill cuffed him quickly. "You're under arrest for possession of unlicensed goods and—" "Possession?" Len barked. "I'm just the delivery boy. I don't own any of it. It's all Parsons' doing." "Edward Parsons?" Agatha stepped forward. Len hesitated, eyes darting. "He paid me to move crates. Said it was special butter, nothing dodgy. Then after that woman died, he told me to clear the stock, quick as I could." "Where is he now?" Bill demanded. "I don't know. Swear on me mother's grave." "Convenient, considering she's probably safer company," said Agatha. Bill ignored her. "We'll see what the station makes of it. Get in the car." As he loaded the man into the police vehicle he'd called for, Agatha wandered back inside the creamery, her nerves still fizzing. The air felt heavier now, thick with sour milk and menace. She examined the churns again, uneasy. One near the door had fresh marks on the rim, as if moved recently. She pried the lid off. The stench hit her first, metallic and wrong. Inside, among the viscous sludge, something gleamed faintly in the torchlight. She reached in, gagging, and pulled it free. A signet ring, gold, engraved EP. Her stomach lurched. The ring was sticky, smeared dark. Blood. Bill reappeared at the doorway, face grim. "What have you got?" She held it up. "Proof that our baker's in more trouble than we thought." He examined it under the beam. The initials caught the light, damning and delicate. "Fresh," he murmured. "If that blood's his, he's hurt badly." "And if it's not?" she asked. "Then someone's staging a very neat disappearance." They sealed the area and drove back through the mist to Burford. The road curved past fields glistening under thin rain, sheep staring blankly at their intrusion. Agatha sat silent for once, cigarette forgotten between her fingers. Finally she said, "Do you believe him, the chef?" Bill shrugged. "He's small fry. Someone else runs the show. The butter racket's bigger than we thought." And Edwards vanished conveniently in the middle of it. "He could be hiding, or dead." "Oh, don't say that," Agatha snapped. "If he's dead, I'll never get to accuse him properly." Bill smiled faintly. "Always priorities with you." Back in Castley, she dropped Bill at his flat and drove home alone, headlights slicing through mist. Her hands trembled slightly on the wheel. It wasn't fear exactly, but more irritation that things were slipping out of her control again. At her cottage, the warmth was a shock. Hodge greeted her with his usual disdain, tail flicking like a metronome. "Yes, I'm late," she told him, peeling off her coat. "You're lucky I wasn't shot by a dairy thief." He meowed pointedly and turned his back, which she accepted as forgiveness. She poured herself a gin, sank into the armchair, and stared at the ring on the table. The gold caught the firelight, deceptively innocent. "EP," she murmured. "Edward Parsons, baker, liar, smuggler, or victim." She took a long drink, the gin sharp as regret. The room smelled of smoke and damp wool. For all her bravado, loneliness pricked at her edges. Mrs. Bloxby would tell her to rest, to let the police handle it. But Mrs. Bloxby didn't know the satisfaction of solving what men dismissed. Hodge leapt onto her lap, curling into a ball. She stroked his fur absently. "You see, Hodge," she said, "it's never just butter and flour. It's always blood underneath." He purred, untroubled by human insight. The ring gleamed again in the flicker of the fire, a small, accusing moon in her modest sitting room. Agatha sighed, lighting another cigarette. "Men," she muttered. "They vanish when you need them, reappear when you don't, and leave stains everywhere." Outside, the drizzle turned to steady rain, washing the Cotswold lanes clean, at least on the surface. The morning broke with the kind of soft drizzle that seemed designed for gossip. Carsley had woken early to the thrilling news that the late Edward Parsons, baker, heartthrob, and suspected smuggler, had not only left behind debts but also a fiancée no one had heard of. By 8 o'clock, Doris Simpson was already ringing Agatha's doorbell. "You'll never believe it," she said, barging in with the air of one who had single-handedly unearthed a national scandal. "There's a young woman in Burford calling herself Sophie Lane. Says she's Edward's intended. And get this, she's inherited Le Pain de Vin." Agatha, in dressing-gown and curlers, groaned. Another woman? Of course. Dead men always leave behind surprises, and they're usually blonde. "She's not blonde," Doris said smugly. "Redhead. Young. Writes about food for the Oxford Gazette. They say she's lovely, poor thing." Agatha lit a cigarette. "Poor thing, my foot. She's either a grieving saint or a calculating witch. Possibly both." By noon, half the village had convened at the Red Lion to debate whether Sophie's tears were genuine. Mrs. Bloxby, sipping her tea serenely, murmured, "It's unkind to judge grief, but it's curious how she appeared just after the police confirmed Edward's possible demise." "Curious?" Agatha snorted. "It's practically choreography." Bill Wong appeared at her cottage later that afternoon, damp from the rain and looking weary. "You're not going to like this, Agatha." "I rarely do," she said. "The will's being read tomorrow at Brimley and Hart, Edward's solicitors. Sophie Lane's named as the sole beneficiary." Agatha's eyes narrowed. Convenient. The man vanishes and she inherits a bakery tied to a smuggling racket. "We've got nothing solid yet," said Bill, "but she's on the list. Cyanide was used in Millie Sharp's poisoning. The records show a recent purchase by a Sophie Lane." "Cyanide? For baking?" "She claims it's for food photography props. That's what she told the chemist." Agatha let out a low laugh. "Oh, she's good. Too good." "Don't get ideas," Bill warned. "We'll handle it. You'll handle it about as well as the butter scandal. I'm going to that will reading." "It's police business." "Then consider me a witness with excellent taste in hats." The next morning, Burford looked washed clean but still smelled faintly of scandal. Agatha dressed with care, navy skirt, matching jacket, and pearls that made her feel halfway between detective and duchess. Charles Frayth, predictably late, offered to drive her. "Why the pearls?" he asked as they bumped along the road. "To show I mean business." "They make you look like you're attending a christening, not a crime." "Shut up, Charles." Brimley and Hart occupied a narrow Georgian building near the market square. Inside, it smelled of old paper and thwarted ambition. A small group had gathered, mostly creditors and curious locals pretending to be distant cousins. Sophie Lane sat at the centre like a tragic heroine from a serial drama, pale, perfectly composed and wearing a black dress that was a shade too chic for mourning. Her copper hair gleamed even in the dull light. Agatha immediately disliked her. The solicitor, a fussy man with spectacles and a martyr's patience, cleared his throat. The last will and testament of Edward Parsons, dated 6 months prior to his disappearance, leaves the entirety of his estate, including Le Pain de Vin and its associated assets, to Miss Sophie Lane in anticipation of their forthcoming marriage. A murmur rippled through the room. Sophie gave a soft gasp, lifted a handkerchief, and promptly fainted. Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Charles leaned in. "Should I catch her?" "Let her fall, it'll be more honest." Mrs. Bloxby, seated behind them, tutted gently. "Now, Agatha, that poor girl might be in shock." "She's in rehearsal," Agatha muttered. The solicitor fussed around Sophie until she came to, fluttering her lashes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's all been too much. Edward was everything to me." "So much so you've inherited him entirely," Agatha murmured. Mrs. Bloxby's calm eyes caught hers. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "She's acting." "You noticed?" She looked to see who was watching before she fainted. Agatha felt a thrill. Then we're back in business. After the reading, Sophie made her dramatic exit, escorted by a tall, nervous man who introduced himself as her photographer. Agatha intercepted them at the door. "Mrs. Raisin," she said sweetly. "From Carsley. I couldn't help but admire your performance." Sophie blinked. "Performance? The fainting. Perfectly timed." The young woman flushed. I'm implying you're far too clever to marry a man like Edward without a reason." "He was kind," Sophie said quickly. "Generous. Misunderstood." "And profitable," Agatha added. Charles coughed diplomatically. "Perhaps now isn't the time for—" "It's always the time for truth," Agatha snapped. Sophie turned away. "You're cruel. I loved him." "Then you'll want justice as much as I do," Agatha said. "Or is justice bad for business?" The photographer muttered something about catching a train, and they disappeared into the drizzle. "Well done," Charles said. "You've terrified a grieving woman." "She's about as grieving as a fox in a henhouse," said Agatha. Back in Carsley, the gossip spread faster than yeast. Doris reported that Sophie had been seen at the chemist's 2 weeks earlier buying photography chemicals, the very shop where the cyanide had been sold. "Could be coincidence," Mrs. Bloxby said when Agatha recounted it later that afternoon. "And I could be the Queen of Sheba," Agatha replied. "She's hiding something. I can smell deceit and Chanel No. 5. Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "You sound jealous." "Don't be absurd," said Agatha, lighting a cigarette. "Jealous of a slip of a girl with hair like autumn leaves and cheekbones that could slice butter? Ridiculous." "Of course," said Mrs. Bloxby gently. Agatha glared, then sighed. "Maybe a little." "Perhaps she isn't guilty of murder," said the vicar's wife. "Only of vanity." "Same difference," Agatha muttered. That evening Bill Wong called. "We've found the receipt," he said. "Cyanide signed S. Lane. Claims it was for food styling. We'll bring her in tomorrow morning." Agatha hesitated. Something in his tone prickled her instincts. "You think it's that simple?" "It rarely is, but she's our best lead. You should stay out of it now." "Stay out? I practically invented this mess." "Which is precisely why you're banned from the station until further notice." Agatha slammed the phone down. Hodge jumped onto the table, tail twitching. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "I'm not meddling, I'm clarifying." He blinked slowly, unimpressed. She poured herself a gin and tonic and sat staring at the window. The drizzle had turned to steady rain, the kind that blurred the outlines of everything: roads, fields, people. Sophie Lane, she thought, fitted that weather perfectly. Soft around the edges, pretty from afar, impossible to trust up close. Still, something didn't sit right. If Sophie was guilty, why inherit a business crawling with police attention? Why stay at all? Agatha stubbed out her cigarette, muttering, "She's either cleverer than I thought, or much, much dumber." She picked up the phone. Half tempted to ring Charles, half tempted to ring Bill and gloat. Instead, she reached for her coat. "All right, Hodge," she said. "We're going for a drive, just a short one, to think." He yawned pointedly and curled up again, indifferent to her grand plans. Agatha paused at the door, glancing back at the little domestic tableau. Cat, armchair, smoke curling into the lamplight. It was absurd how lonely Victory could feel. She switched off the light. Her reflection caught faintly in the window, middle-aged, proud, a little foolish. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we'll find out which bride baked the poison." Then she stepped out into the rain. Carsley had not seen such excitement since the vicar's wife accidentally set fire to the WI raffle table. Word had spread faster than jam over warm scones. Agatha Raisin was reviving the ill-fated Cotswold Bake-Off, this time in memory of the late Edward Parsons. By Saturday, the village hall was transformed. Paper bunting drooped over trestle tables. The air smelled of sugar, nerves, and social competition. Roy Silver darted about with a camera crew like a hyperactive sparrow, shouting directions. "Angles, darling, angles! I want drama, I want pathos. Think Great British Murder Bake." Agatha adjusted her hat, muttering, "If he says pathos again, I'll ice him myself." Mrs. Bloxby, arranging daffodils near the judging table, smiled placidly. "It's a lovely idea, Agatha. A little healing after so much excitement." "Healing?" Agatha snorted. "I'm after exposure, not therapy. If the killer's still sniffing around, this'll flush them out faster than sherry at a parish fete. Charles Fraith strolled in, immaculate as always, carrying a tray of eclairs. "I do hope this isn't another of your traps, Aggie. You've got that gleam again." "You mean intelligence?" "No," he said, lips twitching. "Mischief." Bill Wong arrived next, his expression halfway between resignation and despair. "I still can't believe the Chief Inspector signed off on this," he said. "Technically," said Agatha, "he didn't. But he didn't say no, either. Ambiguity is my specialty." "It's your obituary waiting to happen," Bill muttered. The contestants assembled. Sophie Lane, pale but poised, Mrs. Dipple from the Red Lion with her eternal scowl, and a collection of amateur bakers who clearly believed icing could mask incompetence. Agatha had secretly purchased her entry from a bakery in Cirencester and was feeling smugly invincible. Roy hovered near the stage. "All right, people. I want smiles, flour in the air, passion in the pastries, and if anyone faints, do it in the direction of the camera." Agatha hissed, "If you turn this into reality television, I'll throttle you with your microphone cable." The bake-off began with the ceremonious clang of the WI teapot lid. Bill stationed himself discreetly at the back, keeping an eye on Sophie, whose trembling hands seemed less grief-stricken than calculated. Agatha wandered between tables, offering false encouragement. "Lovely crust, Mrs. Dipple. Did you use margarine?" "Be off with you," snapped the woman. "Sophie, darling, that sponge looks tragic. Perhaps add more self-pity." Sophie shot her a frosty look. "I'm dedicating this to Edward. It's his favourite recipe." "How touching," Agatha murmured. "Let's hope it's less fatal than the last one." Charles coughed to hide a laugh. "You do bring warmth to community events, Aggie." By mid-afternoon, the hall shimmered with heat and gossip. Mrs. Bloxby moved quietly through the crowd, soothing tempers while Roy's camera whirred. The judges, a portly mayor, a retired baker, and Agatha herself, assembled at the long table. "We'll begin with presentation," Agatha announced, savouring the authority. First came Mrs. Dipple's lopsided Victoria sponge, then Sophie's elegant tiered cake crowned with sugared almonds, and finally Agatha's perfectly symmetrical torte, courtesy of Cirencester's best patisserie. Sophie's cake was the picture of refinement until, under the weight of attention, it began to lean, then collapse with a soft sigh. The audience gasped. Roy, ever alert, zoomed in for drama. "Oh dear," Agatha said sweetly. "Collapsed under pressure. How tragic." Sophie's eyes glittered with humiliation. "Something's tampered with it." "Yes, gravity," Agatha said. Charles leaned over. "Don't gloat, Aggie. You'll only encourage lightning." Next, Agatha's own entry gleamed under the hall lights, glossy, perfect, suspiciously professional. The retired baker sniffed. "Looks rather too perfect, if you ask me." "It's called skill," said Agatha sharply. "It's called shop-bought," Bill murmured from behind her. Agatha ignored him. The judges sliced, tasted, and hummed their way down the line. Bill, however, lingered near Sophie's ruined confection, eyeing the crumbs. "Something's off," he said. "That'll be her attitude," said Agatha. "No," Bill said quietly. "Smell that? Bitter almonds." He called for quiet. The chatter ebbed. Mrs. Bloxby looked alarmed. "Everyone, step back," Bill ordered. "Nobody touch these plates." Roy lowered his camera reluctantly. "Oh, darling, the tension's marvellous, but you're ruining my shot." "Shut up, Roy!" several voices chorused. Bill summoned a constable to collect the samples. "We'll have these tested," he said. "Agatha, did you handle this cake?" "Of course not," she said indignantly. "No fingerprints, no fuss, I hope," he muttered. The crowd buzzed with speculation as police whisked away the cakes. Sophie sank into a chair, pale as sugar dust. "It wasn't me," she whispered. "I'd never," Agatha interrupted. "Then who swapped your ingredients? Your fiancé's ghost?" "You're enjoying this," Sophie snapped. "A little," said Agatha, "but I'd enjoy the truth more." The hall began to empty under the excuse of fresh air. Charles fetched Agatha a tea while Mrs. Bloxby tried to comfort Sophie. Outside, drizzle returned, tapping softly on the windows. After an hour, Bill returned, holding 2 envelopes. His face was unreadable. "Well?" Agatha demanded. "Lab found cyanide traces," he said. "Only in Sophie's cake. Yours was clean." "Naturally," said Agatha. "Don't smirk," said Bill. "If you hadn't switched the order of judging at the last minute, she might be dead." Agatha blinked. "I what?" "You insisted your cake be tasted after hers. You effectively stopped me from eating poison, so congratulations, you've accidentally saved my life." "You're welcome," she said faintly. "Still," Bill continued, "it proves someone targeted Sophie, not you." Mrs. Bloxby spoke softly. "Then the killer was here today." "Yes," said Bill, "and they'll know their plan failed." From the back of the hall came a sudden movement, a clatter of trays. A woman in a catering apron bolted for the exit. "Stop her!" shouted Bill. Agatha caught a flash of auburn hair beneath the cap. Familiar, furious. "Clarissa!" she cried. Edward's ex-wife flung open the door, sprinting into the drizzle. Bill chased her, slipping on the hall steps. Agatha, ignoring sense, tore after them, heels clicking across the wet car park. Clarissa darted behind a catering van, fumbling with her handbag. A glint of metal, a small vial, fell to the ground. "Poison!" Agatha gasped. "She's got another dose!" Bill lunged, but Clarissa swung a tray like a weapon. "You don't understand," she cried. "It was mine. The recipe, the business, all of it. He stole everything." "Including your morals," Agatha shouted back. "He ruined me. And then that silly girl paraded as his widow. I just wanted justice." "You wanted profit," Agatha said, voice sharp. "Poison's cheaper than lawyers." Clarissa made a break for it, straight into the remains of the catering table. Her foot skidded on spilled custard, and she went down spectacularly, face first into a trifle. Bill caught her by the wrist as she struggled, dripping with cream and fury. Roy, never one to miss opportunity, called from the doorway, "Hold that pose, it's divine." "Roy," Bill barked, "turn that camera off." "But it's your best angle, darling," Agatha pressed a hand to her forehead. "Of all the ways to end a murder case, I get custard." Police arrived minutes later, escorting a spluttering Clarissa away. The villagers, drawn by noise, watched with fascination. Mrs. Dipple muttered, "I said it'd end in tears, or trifle." As the crowd dispersed, Mrs. Bloxby approached Agatha with her usual gentle smile. "You did well, my dear." "It wasn't deliberate," said Agatha. "My entire investigative method seems based on luck and indigestion." "Still," said Mrs. Bloxby, "you saw what mattered. Pride, jealousy, vanity. They're the same ingredients in every crime." Agatha managed a smile. "And every cake." Charles appeared, holding an umbrella over her head. "Heroine of the hour," he said. "How does it feel to be immortalized on Roy's next broadcast?" "Sticky," she said, "and unappreciated." "Come along, then. You've earned a gin." "Two," said Agatha. Later, back at her cottage, the excitement gave way to exhaustion. Hodge prowled across the armchair, tail twitching. Agatha set down her handbag and poured herself that promised gin. The radio burbled faintly with Roy's voice. "Viewers, tonight's Bake-Off finale turned deadly when—" She switched it off. "Honestly," she told Hodge, "he's worse than the murderer. At least she had motive." Hodge meowed, unimpressed, and climbed into her lap. She stroked him absently, the faint smell of custard still clinging to her sleeve. "It's funny, you know," she said softly. "All that fuss for love and cake, and in the end, everyone just wanted to be admired." He blinked, already half asleep. Agatha looked out at the drizzle tracing silver threads down the window pane. "Don't look at me like that," she murmured. "I'm not sentimental, just tired." She lit a cigarette, the flame flickering against the quiet. Outside, the village settled back into calm, bunting sagging, scandal cooling, gossip refueling for tomorrow. Agatha sipped her gin, sighed, and smiled wryly. "At least this time," she told Hodge, "nobody died in my kitchen." He purred, the universal sound of agreement. Carsley basked in a rare patch of sunlight, as though even the weather had decided to behave now that Agatha Raisin had, once again, restored order, or at least rearranged chaos into something printable. The Evesham Echo headline had been particularly galling: "Agatha Raisin and the Bake-Off Murders." The accompanying photo caught her mid-blink, looking less like a triumphant sleuth and more like someone about to sneeze. She folded the paper with a sigh. "I look deranged," she muttered. Hodge, stretched luxuriously on the kitchen table, gave a slow, superior blink that suggested agreement. A knock at the door interrupted her brooding. Charles Fraith entered without waiting, as usual, radiating self-satisfaction and the faint scent of expensive soap. "Come along, Aggie," he said. "I'm taking you to lunch. You deserve a reward." "I deserve peace," she said, reaching for her handbag. "But since that's impossible, I'll settle for food." "Excellent attitude. There's a new place near Chipping Campden. Promises honest Cotswold cooking, which I assume means things boiled in despair. You do know how to tempt a girl, said Agatha dryly. At the restaurant, a converted barn with pretensions, they were seated by a window overlooking an aggressively scenic meadow. Charles ordered wine without consultation. You've become quite the celebrity, he said, unfolding his napkin with aristocratic precision. Roy tells me he's fielding offers for a documentary. The Raisin Mysteries, I believe. Agatha groaned. If he uses that title, I'll poison him next. He insists you have natural camera presence. He means I shout, Charles smiled. Exactly, it's charming. You think being loud and middle-aged is charming? In you, yes. It saves me having to listen to my own conscience. She gave him a look that might have curdled milk. You're insufferable. And yet, here we are, he said pleasantly, raising his glass. Their lunch passed with the usual mixture of teasing and reluctant warmth. Agatha, though she'd never admit it, was enjoying herself until a couple at the next table began whispering and glancing her way. It's her, the woman murmured audibly. The detective woman from the paper. Do you think she brings her own poison? Said the man. Agatha pretended not to hear but felt colour rising in her cheeks. Wonderful, she said. I've gone from private investigator to public hazard. Charles chuckled. You wanted fame. I wanted respect. Same thing these days. When they returned to Carsley, Roy Silver's car was already outside her cottage, small, shiny, and illegally parked on the grass verge. Darling, he exclaimed, bursting through her gate like an operatic hurricane. The Mail on Sunday wants an interview, the Mirror wants your recipe for justice, and BBC Radio Oxford wants a segment called Murder and Muffins. Isn't that delicious? You're insufferable too, said Agatha. Flatterer. Now we need to discuss exclusivity. A book deal, perhaps. Agatha Raisin, A Life in Crumbs. Out, she said. But, Roy, out, before I feed you to the cat. He hesitated, then kissed her cheek airily. Don't be cross, darling. Fame loves the unwilling. You'll thank me. She shut the door firmly and leaned against it. I'd thank him if he vanished into a meringue. That evening, Mrs. Bloxby arrived with a basket of scones and that gentle expression which implied forgiveness in advance. I thought you might be weary of the excitement, she said kindly. Weary? I'm embalmed in it, Agatha said, lighting a cigarette. The village thinks I'm a walking crime wave. Doris Simpson asked if I'd consider running self-defence classes. Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. People admire you more than they admit. Admiration's overrated. I'd rather be left alone. Would you? Agatha frowned. What do you mean? You always seem lonelier after you've succeeded, Mrs. Bloxby said gently, as though solving the case leaves a space no one can quite fill. Agatha looked away. Smoke curled between them like a curtain. You've been talking to Charles. Only when you're impossible, said Mrs. Bloxby serenely, which I admit is often. You all think I'm vain, Agatha said. You are, Mrs. Bloxby replied, smiling, but you're also brave. You run toward trouble when most would run away. And what does that earn me? Headlines and indigestion. And friends who care, said Mrs. Bloxby, even if you sometimes forget it. Agatha said nothing. Outside, the church bell tolled 6, and the sound seemed to rest on the rooftops like a sigh. When Mrs. Bloxby left, promising to drop in tomorrow with fresh gossip, Agatha poured herself a gin and sat at the window. The sun was lowering over Carsley, soft and gold, brushing the Honeystone cottages with light. Hodge had taken possession of the sill, tail twitching lazily. You've no idea how exhausting people are, she told him. He yawned, magnificent and indifferent. She picked up the paper again, glancing at her own unfortunate photograph. Below it, a column described her as the indomitable Mrs. Raisin, the scourge of rural crime. Indomitable, she murmured. Sounds like I can't be digested. She lit another cigarette, watching the smoke rise and twist in the amber light. For a moment, she felt almost content, tired, yes, but proud in a way she'd never learned to admit out loud. The phone rang. If that's Roy, I'll commit the next murder myself, she muttered, lifting the receiver. Darling, came Roy's exuberant voice, have you heard about the spa in Cheltenham? Scandal, sabotage and seaweed wraps. We must investigate. Agatha sighed, half smiling despite herself. I should have known. Trouble's like limescale, it follows me. That's the spirit, said Roy. I'll pick you up tomorrow. Pack something glamorous and waterproof. She hung up, shaking her head. Next time, she said aloud, glancing at Hodge, I'm buying biscuits. He stretched luxuriously, purring as if to agree. Outside, dusk settled over Castley, the village calm again, for now. The faint scent of baking drifted from someone's open window, blending with the smoke from Agatha's cigarette. She leaned back, watching it curl upward, white and fine as icing sugar, and thought, not unhappily, that vanity cooled slowly, but never quite disappeared.